I'm Sarah McKnight. I'm the Deputy Director of Employment Skills and Education in HMPPS. And so therefore have the kind of real pleasurable job of being part of the team who is driving everything we're doing around the National Year of Reading. And in a moment, I'll give you the headlines about some of the great people we've got speaking today, but I just wanted to say a few things about why this event is important, and we'll also maybe we can put the housekeeping slides up so people can be digesting that as I speak. So literacy in our system, I think, is really important. It's important in lots of people's lives for lots of reasons, and that they translate really well into the prison environment. But we start at a base where there's lots of prisoners who have very low literacy levels in our prisons. So and haven't had the greatest experience of education system, and therefore haven't embraced opportunities to do anything about that. And we also have high prevalence of neurodiversity, so that can compound some of the reasons that people aren't able to read. But we know that people who do engage in prison education are less likely to reoffend by 9 percentage points. And it's not just a skill that people need to be able to operate in life. You know, we need people who come out of custody to be able to access the world in the most effective way possible to support that rehabilitation journey. So you get lots of paperwork, lots of things, forms to fill in, etc. Being able to read what's in the food at the supermarket, etc. All of those things are really important life skills, but equally there's real pleasure in reading. So many of us take pleasure in the things that we read. I was always quite captivated by reading as a child, and for those of you who are old enough, I remember reading Adrian Mole books with my dad, but we couldn't get through them because my dad would laugh so hard. So, you know, there's real kind of moments in your life that kind of reading can relate to, and that's, you know, really important when you think about the family connections and the wider connections that people need to make in the community. At least having something to talk about, which might be the book you're reading as well, can be really enriching and experience. So it's important for lots of reasons. So I think the collective work and the joy in which I see people engaging in that work, and the joy in which I've experienced prisoners taking from those efforts is immensely worthwhile. And you know, there are just some amazing things going on in the system which you'll be able to hear about today. So we've got a number of speakers, so I'm just going to give you the headlines of our esteemed colleagues. So we've got Dr. Jayne Finlaly, who's a lecturer in librarianship at the University of Sheffield. Gemma Brockham, who's the head of reducing reoffending at HMP Chelmsford. Carly Farley, who's the corporate comms lead at CFO. T. Khan, who's our lived experience lead in HMPPS. Victoria Barnett, who is a prison library development manager at Kent Council. She's also the chair of the Libraries Chartered Institute of Library and Information Professionals Group. Kind of thought my job title was long. And we also have Lisa Webber, who's a learning and skills manager in the youth custody service. So are you going to have kind of lots of snippets of information? I say snippets because we're on a tight deadline to enable us to just cover some of the questions that you've asked previously, or you might want to put in the chat today. But if we don't get to them all, we will come back to you. And if your question is for a particular individual, please do state that. So without further ado, I think we'll get on with our first speaker. So, as I said, Dr. Jayne Finlaly is I struggle to say, lecturer in librarianship at the University of Sheffield. So her research focuses on library provision for people impacted by incarceration, both in prison and the community. We've worked together on the review of the prison library service, and Jayne, you're very welcome today, and we look forward to hearing what you've got to say.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I struggle to say my own job title as well, so I'm with you there. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, okay. So it's a real privilege to be here as part of this panel, because there's been fantastic work happening in this area for many years, and often with little recognition. So it's wonderful to see the current spotlight on reading in justice settings. Next slide, Dan. So when we talk about reading in this context, much of the discussion, understandably, focuses on reading literacy as a functional skill. And Sarah has mentioned the importance of this already in our context. We know that literacy levels among prison populations are disproportionately lower than the general population. And of course, improving these skills is essential for navigating daily life, participation in education, accessing employment, communication, and engaging fully in society. And I know there'll be some examples today of how people are being supported in terms of reading education. I'm, however, going to focus more on the evidence around reading as a practice rather than as a functional skill. So this is sometimes called reading for pleasure, recreational reading. There's lots of terms, but in a nutshell, reading because we want to and getting joy from that, rather than because we have to. And reigniting that joy from reading is what the National Year of Reading is all about. And importantly, for our context, this kind of reading isn't limited to those with higher literacy levels. Reading involves a range of different practices with different ways of participating. So yes, we can read written stories individually, but we can also listen to stories being read aloud, participate in shared reading initiatives, and discuss literature with others. Next slide, Dan. A related point that I'm keen to make at the outset is that reading for pleasure is distinct, or should be distinct, from formal education. Many people in the criminal justice system we know have experienced disrupted schooling, exclusion, or other educational trauma, and as a result might be reluctant to engage in activities framed as compulsory education. Varied recreational reading activities offer something different because they are informal, they're voluntary, self-directed, and this element of choice, I think, is key to helping people engage or re-engage with reading. Every evaluation of a prison-based reading initiative that I read emphasises the importance of autonomy and choice, the choice of whether or not to participate, how to participate, the material that people read, or even the elements of the story that they choose to discuss with each other. And I've included this quote from my own research on engagement with library services during custody. And this is from a young person in a secure college who said, "It's the choice thing. In prison, there's no freedom of mind at all, but the library is different. You're not forced to do things." And other participants drew an explicit contrast between the informal library space and the classroom for this reason. Next slide, Dan. So what does the evidence say about the value of reading for pleasure? Much of the evidence in justice settings comes from relatively small qualitative studies or evaluations of specific reading initiatives, rather than large-scale studies about long-term outcomes. But the findings across these studies are consistent, and for today's context, I've chosen to focus on three themes. This general theme of well-being, then identity, self-reflection and hope, and family relationships, with a final thought about what this means for practice. Next slide, thanks. So one of the most consistent findings in wider research about reading for pleasure is that it can support emotional well-being and coping during difficult life circumstances. And this is particularly relevant in criminal justice settings, where many people are dealing both with challenges or trauma that existed prior to incarceration, but also with the pains of imprisonment itself, including boredom, loneliness, and isolation. And the evidence shows that reading can provide a sense of escape from this environment and offer something to alleviate this loneliness and isolation. And I wanted to include this quotation from a reader in a prison in Chile, also so I could flag some really exciting research being carried out there around the social dimension of reading in prisons and links to desistance. But this participant said that reading is an escape from here. It's an escape from my confinement, from my loneliness. It's a companion. The relational dimension of reading also matters for well-being, and evaluations of reading groups and shared reading initiatives often point to the connections and the community created as part of these discussions with others. One of the most robust UK studies to show the impact on well-being is the evaluation of shared reading in psychologically informed planned environments, or PIPEs, in prison. Shared reading involves participants listening to a short story or poem being read aloud and discussing these together, making it accessible regardless of literacy level. And in this study, participants who took part in shared reading reported higher levels of well-being, hope, agency, self-efficacy, and interpersonal trust than those who did not participate. Next slide, Dan. So I've grouped together some of the other key evidence about reading into this theme that I've dubbed identity, self-reflection, and hope. And here I will mention some links with desistance, but I do so with caution, because desistance research makes clear that moving away from offending is a complex, non-linear process shaped by both internal and structural factors. So I'm not going to make any simplistic claims that align reading for pleasure with desistance from crime. What the evidence does suggest is that reading may support some of the psychological and narrative processes that feature in desistance research, particularly around how people make sense of their lives and identities. I think many of you will be familiar with Bishop's concept of books as both mirrors and windows. So books can act as mirrors that reflect aspects of our own experiences back to us, and at the same time can act as windows into different lives and perspectives and possibilities. And a particularly powerful example of this comes from Megan Sweeney's work with incarcerated women in the United States. Through extensive interviews, she found that women used reading materials to make sense of their past, to negotiate their present circumstances, and to reach toward different futures. And this is where hope enters the frame as well, allowing people or enabling them to imagine alternative futures. And given the levels of trauma and adversity experienced by many people in custody, that space for reflection and self-understanding is significant. And I wanted at this point as well to flag some important work by academics at the University of Hull, whose research has shown that combining reading with creative writing in prison settings can further support this critical self-reflection and skill development and well-being. And they're currently piloting digital reading groups delivered through in-cell laptops. It's really exciting work. So I would encourage you to read the blog post that I think Dan has already popped in the chat to learn more about that. Next slide, Dan. Thirdly, I'm maybe sidestepping a little, but I really want to discuss the evidence around family reading. We know that maintaining positive family relationships is important for well-being during incarceration and for resettlement. And reading can again play a meaningful role in this context through initiatives that help people in custody to read with or for their children, sometimes through recorded stories or opportunities to read during phone calls and family visits. And evaluations of these initiatives show that they can help to develop or sustain or strengthen family connections, and importantly, to reinforce parental identity. And I thought this was evidenced quite well in this quote from my own research, where a father had never previously considered himself to play a part in his child's learning, thinking this was the mother's role. But through this programme, he began to see reading as a way of showing love and participating in his child's education. So again, linking to this shift in self-perception. And beyond that, Sarah mentioned this, that books simply give people something to talk about in an environment where conversations can be tough. And sometimes the characters and the story also provide a way to explore challenging topics indirectly, making them easier to discuss. Next slide, Dan. So there are many more benefits I could discuss, and a lot of these I think will come out in other presentations. I've grouped together some of what the evidence says is important for creating conditions for reading on this slide, but I'm just going to focus on the one that I have starred and end with this point from some research that I carried out last year as part of the Arts Council England project on raising the profile of prison libraries, and I can see Dan's popped the link to that in the chat. But the work that I did with prison officers found that only 12% remembered learning anything about reading for pleasure during their training, and only 40% had received any information about prison libraries. And some officers told me they didn't know there was a library in their prison until they were assigned to escort someone there. So it's fantastic that you're all here today, and I hope you leave feeling more equipped to promote reading in your workplace. But it's really important that we cascade this knowledge among frontline staff, so they then have the knowledge and the confidence to promote reading among people in their care. And I would say that being told about these benefits isn't quite enough, that staff need to see reading in action and witness this impact firsthand. And my final slide, Dan, is just to say thank you very much. I'm looking forward to the questions, and you're very welcome to get in touch if you have any further questions about what I've talked about.
Great, thank you very much, Jayne. Really, really interesting. I'll definitely be rereading all your links, but you ended on a very nice note, which means I get to introduce Gemma Brockman, who can tell you exactly how to do the things that Jayne's just said you should be doing in terms of embedding a reading culture in your prison. And I have personal knowledge that Gemma has done a very impressive job in this space as head of reducing reoffending at Chelmsford, and even presented to HMIP. So Gemma, really excited to hear what you've been doing at Chelmsford.
Thank you very much, Sarah. So as Sarah said, I'm head of reducing reoffending at HMP Chelmsford, and it's just an absolute pleasure to talk about reading with you all today and to spotlight how it's worked in an operational prison setting. Next slide, please. So our reading strategy at Chelmsford, our model is a whole prison approach. So we've kind of looked at 4 different aspects of how to do that. And we've positioned reading through every part of our community here at Chelmsford. We've looked at all the different aspects of a person's life and threaded reading throughout all of those aspects, and threaded reading throughout all of our community life at Chelmsford. And I think one of the ways that we have done that is we've pivoted our conversations and our discussions with other leaders across the prison. So instead of saying, could you please support this reading initiative, what we are now saying, and the discussions that we're now having, are how can reading support the reduction of self-harm and violence? How can reading help maintain family ties, to create a settled and safe living environment on our wings? And how can reading help to improve learning and employment opportunities? So I think that's really helped to engage and unlock those discussions. The next part of our model is about having access for all. So by having a truly fully integrated reading strategy, it really has opened the doors to having a more diverse range of reading opportunities and activities. And that is truly led by leaders across all strands of prison life here at Chelmsford. The next aspect is measuring impact. We measure everything here at Chelmsford. We want to know, is this benefiting a person's life? Is this benefiting our community, and how? If it isn't, how can we learn from that? How can we develop that? And we do this by having a robust qualitative and quantitative reading dashboard. And that dashboard has ownership and responsibility across the whole prison and all leaders across the prison. And we monitor that each month by a multi-agency and multifunctional reading steering group. And the last aspect is celebrating success and celebrating progression. We really try and do this at every opportunity, because I find that by showing the successes and really celebrating people's progression, it keeps people on board, it keeps people motivated, and it really does show staff and prisoners what can be achieved in reading. Next slide, please. So this slide shows you all the different strands of a person's life that we have assessed and kind of implemented some form of reading activity into. But by having this kind of multitude of different strands, it really does require a buy-in from all across the prison. And I think an example of how we've done that is as leaders across the prison, we have led by example. So again, instead of saying to people and other leaders across the prison, could you please become involved in this reading strategy? Could you please champion reading? We've actively participated ourselves in those. Examples of this is the Reading Ahead 6-book challenge that prisoners do via the reading agency. We as leaders actively do that 6-book reading challenge. We write our diaries, we publish them, we talk about them to staff and prisoners. We collectively read a book. We read a section of a book each. We are recorded doing that reading, and that is published. That recording is published to staff and prisoners to show our enjoyment of reading and the different levels of reading across our leadership team. We celebrate a Reader of the Month every single month. We prioritise reading across our establishment training programme. So our monthly shutdown includes reading now. And we discuss things like library attendance at the operational morning meeting and our operational regime planning meetings. And I think by doing things like that, it really shows staff and prisoners that we as leaders really do value and see the importance of reading. And I think that creates that domino effect to other staff and prisoners and creates and maintains that buy-in. Next slide, please. So we have a multitude of different reading activities and opportunities, both for reading for pleasure and development of skills, reading progression. But for today, I'm just going to spotlight 2 of those. So one of the things that we are doing as part of our National Year of Reading to further create opportunities for prisoners to build their relationships with their family, we've created interactive family reading events. So these are linked to World Book Day, International Children's Book Day, Roald Dahl Story Day, and World Nursery Rhyme Week. So these are interactive events with storytellers, face painters, arts and crafts stations, fancy dress, and the themes to that particular event. We've run 2 so far. We've got 2 more to go. The feedback and the impact that has been felt so far is that prisoners and their families have reported to us that those events have given them an opportunity to bond and make fun family memories, which I just think is wonderful. Prisoners have said it gives them something to talk about ongoing with their children, and they're all looking forward to the next event. So not only has this encouraged men to read and continue reading, but it also helped to maintain and build family ties. Next slide, please. The second intervention I'd like to spotlight today is our book for every man. So looking at our early days in custody, that can be quite a stressful time for someone during their first days when they first come into prison. Self-harm can be quite high. So we looked at ways to make that first few days safe and settled and really build a decent environment for men. So we came up with an idea of gifting a quick read, an easy read book for every single man that has come in to Chelmsford. And I've given some quotes of what the men are telling us and some data, but really the overwhelming feedback from men on this initiative is that they feel valued and they feel cared for. They have reported that it's nice that we've recognised that it can be quite a stressful time and it gives them something to keep their mind occupied. This scheme has actually helped reduce the levels of self-harm and violence and anxiety levels in our early days unit. And it's increased continued reading. So more men now are going to our library and asking for the next book in the series, which is wonderful. Next slide, please. And as I said before, everything we do, we measure. And these are just some of the examples of some of the impact that we have felt across the establishment. So just to pick out a couple on here, every single man that comes in that is assessed as a low reader, in addition to the reading support available, now also get a dedicated key worker that understands the support available, can help motivate and encourage that man's progression. 200 men have participated in the reading faith-based reading challenge, which has been really great. We're just about to do another one. On average, 13 men have increased at least by 1 level in their literacy every single month. Apologies, I've lost that screen. And 84 men have participated in raising readers with their families. Next slide, please. So I'd just like to end on what I feel truly does show that we are making a difference with reading, and that is listening to the voices of the men, the staff, the families at Chelmsford. So again, I've put some examples of some feedback that we've received, and we gather feedback every single month. But again, the summary of that is that men are telling us that they really love the different ways that they can access reading. They like that it's tailored to the different interests in their life, be it from a health interest through reflective reading in gym programs, or a faith-based or a learning-based aspect. Men tell us that they feel valued by all the different initiatives and the resources and time that we are putting into reading. It's helped staff and prisoner relationships. We've had some wonderful examples of some key worker discussions with prisoners talking about reading and how that is benefiting their life in their community at Chelmsford. It's inspired continued reading. We have a vast amount of examples of men telling us they didn't read before they came into Chelmsford, and now that they actively are reading and enjoying reading. And men are proud of their achievements, and staff are proud of prisoners' achievements. And then to end in terms of kind of looking forward, for me, reading really is supporting men's life at Chelmsford and really supporting our community as a whole. Learning and engagement is better when you do something you enjoy, so we will continue to look at those different aspects of someone's life and how can we introduce reading to that. And then a final key lesson really from Chelmsford is that reading grows when the whole prison owns it, and it really does make a difference to people's lives. Thank you. Back to you, Sarah.
Thanks very much, Gemma. It was really good to hear, and we should definitely think about how we get this good practice spread across the estate. You've done some amazing things, so thank you for sharing that today. I now have the pleasure of introducing Carly, who is in my very own team. So always good to have one of the team on the call. So Carly works for the Creating Future Opportunities programme, which supports people who are quite far from the jobs market into employment. But Carly's been leading lots of work for CFO on with partners about the impact of reading. So over to you, Carly.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Hi everyone, I'm going to give you a really short overview about how we're supporting reading across custody and into the community. As Sarah mentioned, we sit within her team and we really support those that are hardest to help, or those that are really disengaged in custody. But we also work with offenders in the community through our activity hubs and wider community delivery. Next slide, please, Dan. So I just wanted to give you some really quick examples of how we're supporting reading in custody. So we've got lots of book clubs going on. We've got, we're working and training with peer mentors, reading mentors, and we've got reading activities. We're also creating new or refreshed wing libraries on the 13 CFO wings around the country. You'll see there on the lovely picture, just second in from the left, the big lovely pile of books in a trolley there. We've been working with partners like the Reading Agency and Borderline Books to increase access to reading materials on the CFO wings with a range of fiction and non-fiction books. We are taking requests from the men and women on our wings, and we've been surprised at how many garden and cooking and activities books that have been requested too, so a lot of non-fiction books too. What we wanted to do was really make reading not for people that identify as readers, but anyone that's shown any kind of interest in a particular topic too. So in particular, the garden and the cooking books have also informed some of our phase 1 and phase 2 delivery on the wings. And we have seen some nice healthy competition on how and who can grow the juiciest strawberries based on the gardening books that they've received. Next slide, please. I just want to be a little bit self-indulgent here and share one of the most powerful examples of our reading work. And this comes from the CFO Unity wing, which is at HMP Humber. So you'll see on the image here is a little cubbyhole space on the wing that has now become the wing library. And one of our participants, the men on the wing, has been able to use the library as a space where he can switch off and relax. He wrote a poem which he described was the first thing he'd written in years. I will share this at the end of the event, but it really captures what reading and writing can unlock for someone that's rebuilding confidence, and in particular someone that hasn't read previously before. Next slide, please, Dan. Thank you very much. So I know you've heard loads of the amazing stuff that's been going on in custody, but also wanted to talk about how CFO supports offenders leaving custody. So we will work with them through the gate into our community hubs, or if they can't access the community hubs, into the community setting. Equally, we're also working with people on community licenses in the community, so they might never have been into prison. But we know that they can find that some of those responsibilities or appointments, housing issues, finances and family pressures can lead to a lot of uncertainty. But reading is one thing that can stabilise someone, and particularly if they've come from custody, it's something that they can carry with them. We're really trying to build reading into everyday activities in the community hub. So there is some imagery there that you can see around some of our delivery, but again, cooking and garden activity where they might be reading recipes or instructions. They might be doing job searching or looking at what education opportunities they've got available to them. So again, that comes with reading job descriptions and applications. Really importantly, which is a big thing for CFO, is looking at those creative sessions that we're offering that keep people engaged, but using prompts and short texts, which might allow an offender to explore reading or writing in a way that they might not have done previously. So again, finding something that engages with them and then working with them to find some reading material that works for them. Next slide, please, Dan. For those that have worked with Shannon Trust in the custody, we've got hubs in the North East, East Midlands and West Midlands where they can continue to work with Shannon Trust, whether that is being supported by a Shannon Trust Reading Mentor or also becoming a Shannon Trust Reading Mentor in the community. For any participants that are working with CFO in the community, there is always an opportunity to be mentored by someone that's a peer or also become a mentor. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about the book clubs, because they are very much a peer-led activity in the CFO activity hubs. So participants often tell us that this builds confidence, it gives a sense of belonging and routine, and also gives a safe space for them to engage at their own pace. The picture on the screen is of a recent book club title, which was the Tyson Fury autobiography, which has come from our West Midlands hubs. But this in particular, I always use this as a really good example because the participants that were involved in this, each week after reading a chapter, they chose either a recipe or an exercise routine that had been inspired by Tyson Fury. So by the time they'd finished the book, they were also experiencing like a lot more better health outcomes as well, because they were choosing more nutritious food and looking at how exercise supports them. The other one I also wanted to touch on was Shantaram, which I know if anybody was on the call back in January that we did with Lil, it's about a book about a man on the run in India, and that's what they're reading in the East Midlands hub. And this really opened up a more broader discussion about mental health and anxieties, which had a much better positive effect on some of the attendees. But the book clubs aren't just about reading and reading aloud. I know we heard Jayne talk about some amazing things like that, but we're also offering these books as audio books or digital books. There's lots of things in the activity hubs that can support those readers. So we've got like the coloured strips and digital readers that can support people, particularly with dyslexia or struggling with reading. Next slide, please. I'm just going to go for it because I can't see it, but I'm assuming you can. So there's lots of opportunities to get involved, of which we've tested loads of them. We've been really fortunate to work with Lil and Alex and the reading team and everyone that you see here. And we've explored loads of free ways and no and low cost ways that offenders can get involved. So there's a few things that I just wanted to call out on the slides, which you can see here. So book donations and partnerships. So I've obviously mentioned Borderline Books a couple of times there. So if you've not heard about Borderline, they're based up in Northumberland and they receive letters from offenders across custody all over the UK, and they will send out specific books to offenders if they're not able to access them through the establishment libraries. So they're a really good resource. You can also go up and collect number of books. So I collected 300 books there for Rochester Prison for our wing there a few months ago, and they're amazing. They're an amazing resource. But also book swaps and the pen pal clubs that I've mentioned. So they've been really beneficial for us to find a way to engage low or non-readers into a conversation about books. And again, those that aren't readers, audiobook versions have been made available. So it's really open to anybody that's interested. Flagged, which I know a couple of other people have flagged as well, the resources from the National Literacy Trust and access to the easy reads and the quick reads, which again I know you've heard about before, but also a number of publishers are offering discounted book support and National Year of Reading. So they've been really beneficial to us and have increased the amount of access to books in a really low spend way. Also, I've just put on there as well the National Literacy Trust anthology, but also the CFO short stories. There's been loads of ways that offenders have been able to contribute to shared writing or publications via the National Literacy Trust anthology. And we've had so many submissions that we're also going to do a CFO short stories project towards the end of the year to celebrate it. I hope that gives you a whistle-stop tour. So if we go on to the next slide, but if you've got any questions, please let me know. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Carly, and for remaining professional despite the IT glitches. They're always fun in the middle of your presentation. So well done. So I think now we are moving on. I'm going to introduce T. Khan, who is the National Lived Experience Lead here at HMPPS. And he supports all of us in MoJ and HMPPS to make sure we embed the voice of lived experience into all of our work. So T, over to you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I do apologise. I feel like my voice is breaking. I'm feeling a little bit under the weather. I'm incredibly nervous as well, so please bear with me. I'm just going to spend a few minutes talking about some of my sort of early childhood years and some of the experiences that I went through. So I'm unfortunately of an age where I went to school where you was either a good kid or a bad kid. There was a lack of understanding around sort of neurodiversity and individuals with neurodivergent needs. That meant I always found myself getting into trouble. I think on reflection, I don't think I was a bad kid. I just literally couldn't sit still. Those colleagues that I work with will know that's still the case now. Because of that, I always found myself getting into trouble and getting lots of sort of temporary exclusions. And eventually, at the age of 14, I was permanently excluded from school and entered the pupil referral unit system. I think I only ever went once, and I literally became detached from it straight away and found myself neat, without any sort of follow-ups, without any positive role models, and just having lots of time on my hands. That resulted in me making some really poor choices, and I think over the next 5 years I found myself embedded within the criminal justice system. I'd been in a prison on a number of occasions. I was in the care of the local authority. I think everyone at wits end with what to do with me. The justice system tried its hardest, offered lots of different types of interventions, from intensive supervision orders, but I think I found myself on a really destructive path. Eventually, at the age of 19, I was sent to prison for a significant period of time. I think on reflection, it was something that I really needed. I still remember the day I was given my sentence, and I was sat in my cell and I was just sort of really contemplating life, thinking, what's going to happen now? What am I going to do? And I think it was at that moment in time, I decided that, I really needed to do something. I really needed to sort of change get off the destructive pathway and the course that I was on. I couldn't read or write because I never went to school. I never engaged in any lessons. I never went to classes. So I was always not in them. So I started getting involved in education while I was in prison. I think my first assessment, I was working at entry level 3 for literacy and numeracy. And I started getting involved more and more. And if I'm honest, it's the first time in my life I ever got really excited about something, and I got the bug for it, and I wanted to do more and I wanted to learn more. I still remember a significant moment in time, or a period that really changed the trajectory, was within the education department. The head of education supported me with a application to the Prison Education Trust, and it was for 10 quid, and it was to buy the Collins English Dictionary and Thesaurus. And I literally used to walk around the prison with that book in my hand. I was, I couldn't speak to people. And some of us that work in the justice system will have an understanding of what I mean. And I think that dictionary and that thesaurus really helped improve my vocabulary and really helped me as a sort of moving through the different levels of education. By the time I come out of prison, I didn't just have my sort of level 1 English and maths and level 2s. I had a degree in criminology and social policy, which I did through the Open University. It was 60 credits a year. It was incredibly hard. It was at a point in time where I didn't have any sort of Intel tech or laptops to support me. So a lot of times it was sleepless nights, writing 2,500 word essays on a piece of paper, double line spacing, absolutely horrendous and really difficult. Eventually, I was released from prison and my life really turned around. Utilising some of my lived experiences, my educational attainment, I started working in the third sector, supporting other individuals sort of who are embedded within the justice system, acting as a positive role model for them, and tried to show them that there is another way out. I did that for a number of years, and 3.5 years ago, I joined the civil service. Absolutely incredible pleasure and honour, the biggest honour of my life. The one thing I'm truly grateful for is that I had the opportunity to make my mum and dad proud. I lost my dad about 4 or 5 years ago, so he didn't get to witness me actually coming into the civil service, supporting HMPPS in progressing some of our rehabilitative ambitions. That's it from me, Sarah. I'll keep it short and sweet, and back to you. Thank you.
Well, T, you're probably the most impressive person who's lived the journey. So short and sweet, really, but impactful. And it's our absolute pleasure to have you here, T. We have some good laughs with you, and we make some really good work and progress. So thank you so much, despite feeling a bit poorly and a bit nervous, for just inspiring people in the way that you have. So thank you. Right, well, I will now hand over to Victoria Barnett, who has worked in prison libraries since 2012. We've had the pleasure of interacting a number of times. And she oversees 5 prison library services across a number of establishments. So without further ado, Victoria, over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. Well, we've heard some really interesting speakers today, and I had to chuckle at Carly's requests for gardening and cookery books, because we do get quite a lot of requests for those, and I do buy quite a lot. And people wonder why, but actually it's escapism, isn't it? And a bit of nostalgia. Right, hopefully this is going to work. Yes, also good. So we've heard about wing libraries. And wing libraries and shelves on the wings are great for a quick pick, but what does the library offer that they don't? Sorry, okay, that's working now. So staff, first of all, staff are trained and experienced in engaging with customers to find out what they want, where their interests lie, and how confident they are with reading without any pressure. They listen to customers, treat them as customers, and encourage them to try new things or offer ways to improve their reading. The space is really important too. The environment is calm, and unlike other areas of the prison, this has a positive effect on prisoners, and they often tell us that it's a safe space, that it doesn't feel like prison. Reading is beneficial for mental health, but so is actually spending time in the library environment. Prison libraries also have stock with something to suit everyone. A full library collection will have a broad range of interests and likes, and something for all reading abilities. Having a choice is something that prisoners value when most other choices have been taken away. Prison libraries offer various activities to encourage prisoners to attend and to provide calming distractions. Things like games of chess, jigsaw puzzles, competitions, to name but a few. Many have reading groups for emergent readers to improve and encourage reading, and groups for confident readers who get enjoyment from discussing what they're reading and a sense of belonging to a group. So what makes a good prison library? Staff should be well trained, welcoming and friendly, and they should be confident to discuss and encourage reading. They can usually help people find something that they will enjoy. The stock should be really good quality, well chosen and well curated. The stock needs to be regularly refreshed to keep customers interested. It needs to be relevant and desirable. A good library will engage with customers to find out what they want to read and give them a sense of ownership of the library. A welcoming environment with good quality, well-displayed stock, eye-catching and interesting displays to spark interest, clearly laid out so that things are easy to find, particularly easy read sections and dyslexia-friendly stock to avoid any off-putting potential embarrassment asking for these books. And it should be well lit with somewhere comfortable to sit. It should also be a space that's easy to get to, not tucked away in the far corner of the prison with access issues. Libraries are also reliable and trusted sources of accurate information. Prisoners are cut off from most information sources, so it's an environment where misinformation can really flourish between prisoners. Libraries provide access to legal materials and health resources and can also provide information to support prisoners' needs. So how can a prison library help with reading, including family reading? So as I've said, we have stock for all abilities. We don't want non-readers or those struggling with their literacy skills to think that the library isn't for them. You've already heard how important reading is for everyday life, for future prospects, and for surviving the long hours of boredom in prison. Literacy support. Prison libraries stock books for all reading levels and abilities. We have graded readers, easy reads, quick reads, and graphic novels. Graphic novels are a good way to introduce reading and encourage engagement with books, even without written words. And the same goes for audiobooks, which require a high level of concentration. Prison librarians can guide prisoners to appropriate materials for their interests and abilities, including encouraging confident readers to try new authors or genres to widen their scope. Family projects such as Storybook Dads strengthen family ties, but are also a very powerful motivator for somebody to learn to read or improve their reading. Non-readers can still take part in the project, and when they see how much their children love hearing them read to them, they want to carry on and learn to read themselves. Many won't have been read to as children, and it encourages family literacy, which might just break the offending cycle in a family. So what can the prison library do for you and your prison? There are staff member benefits. In most prison libraries, staff are welcome to become library members too. When staff also read, it can provide some common ground with prisoners and give them something to talk about. Reading's not just good for prisoners' mental health either. Reading for just 10 minutes a day is also good for you. It reduces stress after a long day at work, it calms the mind, it improves vocabulary and concentration. It could even help you sleep better. Boredom is a negative emotion and can lead to destructive behaviours, so reading for pleasure to provide escapism, pass the time, and help calm the mind are really positive outcomes in a prison setting. A prisoner with their nose in a book is one less prisoner looking for trouble. You've heard the research evidence about the benefits of reading for pleasure and its role in the desistance journey. Prisons where there is a strong reading culture, where the library has an important place, are surely calmer environments. And as a prisoner moves on with their lives, being a reader puts them in a better position to succeed. And finally, community. The library creates a community feeling which is really good for the whole prison. It's not just a community of readers, it's a community space that prisoners appreciate spending time in. So what can you do? Please make the library the centre of your prison, raise the profile of the library and share its importance with all staff. Make sure that prisoners can get to the library. If movements officers are required, don't put them at the top of the list to be removed if somebody calls in sick. After all, having a wonderful library is no good to anyone if they can't get to it. Promote the library. Make sure that prison staff are aware of what the library offers. Ensure that all prisoners have an induction session in the library and bring new staff to the library for a full description of what is on offer, so that they're confident to encourage prisoners to use the library. Invite library managers to prison meetings and include them in plans and discussions. Make sure that they're on mailing lists and feel a part of the prison team. This will also make them more visible and the library more visible. And finally, get involved. Find out what's happening in your library and encourage all staff to be advocates of the library and reading. Perhaps you could start a staff reading group in the library and encourage colleagues to attend. Have a book of the month for staff and prisoners to have a shared reading experience. There's lots of ideas and lots you can do, and there's probably a librarian in your prison who can help. Thanks for listening. I think Dan's probably shared the Sillet Prison Library's Excellence Framework link in the chat, and I'll hand you back to Sarah now. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Victoria. Really insightful, and reminding people about prison libraries. I don't go on a prison visit without going in the library and checking who's accessing it. So if you hear I'm coming on a visit near you, you probably need to be able to answer that question. Okay, well, I'm really pleased to welcome Lisa now as well, who is one of the people in our system who has teaching experience in the community. So was a secondary education teacher for 20 years, so an English teacher as well, but also a head teacher. But it's really great that people with varied backgrounds and that kind of education delivery experience have joined the service. So I think Lisa's going to talk a bit about the work she's been doing as part of the YCS. So welcome, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. What an amazing event so far, and I don't think I'm going to be able to add any completely different approaches used in the YCS, and in fact I'll be taking lots of ideas back. I wanted to add some insight, I suppose, and play devil's advocate. I asked to go at the end of this event just to add some complications in and to hopefully trigger some thought. This quote on this slide here is something that a young person said to me, a boy said to me in a school a few years ago. He came from a family that was, the euphemism is hard to reach, a family where there were lots of socioeconomic difficulties at home, and this young person presented lots of challenges to us in school, and there were lots of professionals working with him. And one day he said to me that all of these people working with him wanted him to leave his people behind. And that really struck me. If we move to the next slide. And I just wanted to bring this idea into our discussion today. So as you can see here, I've said I want to play the devil, but I first of all want to establish my credentials with the angels. I really do think that reading is transformative. As Matthew Arnold said, everyone's got the right to access to the best that's been thought and said. But that is a very troubling idea in some ways, because who decides what's the best? Who decides what's worth reading about? I do believe that reading can allow you to explore other worlds, expand your mind, and that it's a cultural legacy that we're all entitled to. And of course, as many people have said this morning, it gives you an access to mainstream life and a chance to make a contribution to society that will be welcomed and recognised by everyone. I've put the word shibboleth there, which I'm sure many of you will know is a sort of, it's like a password, a cultural password. If you are literate, then you are the right kind of person to be employed. You're the right kind of person that knows all the social cues. You can slip into the correct kind of language to fit in. But to put my devil's horns on, do we, as a service and as a society, sometimes panic a little about the drop in literacy and reading? Are we all remembering our own childhoods and worrying that the new generation is not having the same kind of experience that we had? Is this a moral panic? Are we assuming that reading will wave a magic wand and solve lots of social problems through something which we all value? Are we looking at the way that some people live their lives and having a certain amount of distaste for it or disapproval? And is that disapproval something that these young people might detect and might they feel judged by us? And Pygmalion, of course, this idea that we take somebody from a certain class and try and turn them into a different class. And I think that these ideas are worth having in our mind in the way that we frame reading for young people, in my case. Next slide, please. So with that in mind, I was just sort of collecting, obviously, some of the things that we do in the youth service and that are very much also done in the adult estate, and just think about how it might feel to a young person, perhaps, as many others have said, who haven't had an experience in education that they're proud of, or that was very welcoming for them. So, for example, this sense that, there's a deficit here. Let us feed you. Let us give you some healthy food. And there's lots of things there in that list. I'm not going to go through them all because I want you all to have time to ask questions. But sometimes it may feel like they're being poked and prodded, almost in a medical intervention type of way. This isn't good enough. You need to be able to read. It may feel a little bit like judgment. Next slide. There's also a sense that we must be careful not to make literacy and reading sound too functional, and lots of people have mentioned that as well. Of course, we'd want these young people to be able to move on to earn a living and build a life for themselves. But for some young people, that feels like we're trying to push them into a particular mould, or it could do. And we must make sure that we're not just trying to force them to make choices that are convenient to us. Next slide. And of course, we also, as alongside the functional, we want people to understand that reading can be a source of real joy. But can that, to some young people, feel like A, we're out of touch, and B, we're judging the way that they currently seek to have fun and enjoy themselves. So like many of the other speakers, we do enormous amounts of enrichment around reading in the youth estate. I think it's important for us to acknowledge that to some young people coming into YOIs, this may seem quite alien to them. It may seem quite schooly. It may seem quite well-meaning, but perhaps a little bit judgmental. So it's just something for us to think about when we're framing this for young people. Next slide. So finally, this is something I think Jayne mentioned right at the beginning of our presentations, this idea that literature and reading can be a window to the world and a mirror to reflect on yourself. And I just think it's worth us making sure that we're not making cultural assumptions, that we're being open to genuine choice from these young people and the men and women in prison. What world is it that we want the people in our care to explore? What self is it that we're wanting them to encounter? And just finally, is the novel still novel? Obviously, when we think about reading, very often what comes to mind is a good old traditional novel, whether it was written centuries ago or whether it was written last year. The novel is partly called novel because it was a new way of communicating when it first became common. Is this still the current and most prominent way that we expect people to consume language? And can we be more exploratory and exciting in the way we present words to the people that we are hoping to encourage to read? I will pass.